Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us for the Statewide Community Regrant Funding Opportunity Workshop and Overview. My name is Laura Doe. I am the Grants Manager at Arts Mid-Hudson, and joining me today is Arts Mid-Hudson's Funding Coordinator, Vanessa Capuccio-Bear. If you need to contact us at any point, we can be reached via email at grants@artsmidhudson.org or by giving us a call at 845-454-3222, extension 11. For accommodations, Arts Mid-Hudson is committed to facilitating reasonable accommodations for everyone who participates in our programs. So we encourage you to reach out to us for any accommodation needs. These accommodations include translation services for grant assistance, large text documents, technical support, closed captioning, which is available either appearing below to the viewer or by adjusting closed caption settings on the service being used. And as I said, the session is being recorded. Live attendees concerned about being on camera are advised to stop the video on their camera. As a heads up at the top of this webinar, Arts Mid-Hudson offers extensive grant assistance to applicants, which is a feature of the program, which is available to all applicants across all of our funding opportunities. As an applicant, you are encouraged to take advantage of grant assistant appointments to speak directly with our grant staff, Vanessa and myself, and get direct feedback on your planned application. If an applicant has a draft prepared, such as a budget draft, we can look at it and we can give specific feedback. Appointments can be made at artsmidhudson.youcanbook.me. You see the link right here on the slide. This link can also be found in emails about the program on our website for this funding opportunity and in the email signatures of emails received from grants@artsmidhudson.org. We will begin making these appointments available to applicants beginning next Friday, the 23rd, just with everything going on in the holidays. And we'll send an email notification to everyone who RSVP'd for our info sessions when these appointments become available. So again, we're going to begin those appointments time slots for those appointments will become available as by Friday, 23rd at the earliest, but you should hear from us before then. Assistance appointments are a way for us, the staff, to get to know you, the applicant, help you brainstorm, identify ways to improve your submission, and connect you potentially with other individuals, artists, or groups that may benefit from your project or work. So just like with this session, Zoom drop-in Q&A sessions are also offered with an up-to-date schedule and RSVP link on our website for this funding opportunity. Attendees of the information session are already signed up to receive reminders for these Q&A sessions. So now that you've signed up at the Donor Perfect link that we sent out last week, you will get regular updates about these upcoming sessions. So yay, good for you. The Zoom access information is the same for all sessions, including this information session. And if you have questions, again, please feel free to reach out to us at grants@artsmidhudson.org. So today's agenda includes an overview of the following. I'll go over the purpose of this funding opportunity. I'll go over important dates and key details, brief review of the 3 SCR funding opportunities, overview of the 3 funding opportunities, Community Arts Grant, Individual Artist Commission, an Arts Learning Grant. Then we'll do an eligibility overview that applies to all 3 grants, budget tips, evaluation and reporting, submitting a grant proposal, general grant writing tips. And then, and this part is optional, but I do encourage you to attend. Then after that, we're going to do an in-depth overview of each funding opportunity. So if you can only stay up until the grant writing tips, that's going to be our first hour. That will give you, like I said, a general overview of these 3 funding opportunities, and it'll give you it'll give you enough to get started and know where to look in the guidelines, and that will be useful. That said, if there's a particular funding opportunity that you really want more insight into, we recommend that you stay for the second hour, and then you can learn about the nuances of the Community Arts Grant, the Individual Artist Commission, and the Arts Learning Grant. And then at the very end of that 2-hour block, if we still haven't answered your questions, feel free to stay for a Q&A, and we will address them. And again, if you have questions as we're going, feel free to drop them in the chat, and Vanessa will try to address as many of them as they're able. Okay, so let's go over the purpose. Why this grant? So Arts Mid-Hudson and the New York State Council on the Arts, NYSCA, recently announced the Statewide Community Regrant Program. This is a funding opportunity with over $170,000 in NYSCA funds to support the arts in Dutchess, Orange, and Ulster counties. This funding is available to individual artists to create new work in 2026 and to nonprofit organizations, tribal nations, individual artists, libraries, and municipalities for arts and cultural activities in 2026. Where does the funding come from? The statewide community regrants are made possible with funds from a regrant program of the New York State Council on the Arts with support of the Governor's Office and the New York State Legislature. Arts Mid-Hudson administers this funding for Dutchess, Orange, and Ulster counties. Since this is a statewide program, residents of other counties can find an arts council or arts service organization to provide these funds by checking NYSCA's website or by sending an email to Arts Mid-Hudson for direction. But if you're here today, you're probably, I'm guessing, from Dutchess, Orange, and Ulster County. All right, so NYSCA's mission is to, just so you have a sense of, the why of this grant, is to foster and advance the full breadth of New York State's arts, culture, and creativity for all. NYSCA strives to achieve its mission through its core grant-making activity by convening field leaders, providing information and advisory support, and working with partners on special initiatives to achieve mutual goals. And then NYSCA's values, which are core to the statewide community regrant program, include the belief that artists are at the center of the creative endeavor. Strong arts and cultural organizations are vital to connecting the arts to people's lives. Every citizen in New York State can have a meaningful connection to creativity, and every community has a right to cultural self-determination. So now drilling down to Arts Mid-Hudson's regrants, this grant program was previously named the Decentralization Grant Program because it aimed to decentralize decision-making away from Albany or New York City, where NYSCA is based, and give it to local regrant partners like Arts Mid-Hudson. Arts Mid-Hudson can assemble a review process based on community need and reach people in their direct service area of Dutchess, Orange, and Ulster County. Arts Mid-Hudson focuses on centering artists, arts groups, and arts organizations as recipients of the funds, and centering underrepresented artists, arts workers, and audiences. This includes Black, Latino, Indigenous, Asian, people of color, LGBTQIA, and or disabled individuals. That certainly is not an exhaustive list. The local decision-making process is carried out by a peer review panel, and Arts Mid-Hudson staff and board members do not vote in determining who receives funding for our different programs, including this one. Volunteer group of panelists who are artists, arts workers, or community stakeholders is assembled each year to make the funding decisions. Continued, Arts Mid-Hudson administers all three categories of the statewide community regrant program, including community arts grants, individual artist commissions, and arts learning grant. So some general guidelines for this funding opportunity before we drill down. A single applicant may submit one application in 2 out of 3 categories, being the 3 categories being community arts grant, individual artist commission, and arts learning grant. The cumulative amount requested by a single applicant of the statewide community regrant program may not exceed $5,000. Applicants who request more than the $5,000 funding cap may render one or more of their applications ineligible. So please be careful with that. There are separate review processes for each of these 3 funding categories, and we will drill down into what that means later. Current and past grantees of Arts Mid-Hudson must be in good standing with Arts Mid-Hudson grant reporting requirements to be eligible for all 3 SCR funding opportunities. So even if it's not a previous SCR grant, if let's say you have not yet submitted an arts and culture project grant report, you will want to get up to date on that in order to qualify for SCR funding. And If that's the case, if you're in any way unsure about your grant reporting status for any of your grants, including past STR grants or other grants with us, please, we encourage you to reach out to grants@artsmidhudson.org and we can clear that up. All expressive artistic disciplines are eligible, including but not limited to visual, performing, written, digital, traditional, and experimental mediums. All right, now we'll go over the important dates coming up for these grants. All funded activities must take place between April 1st and December 31st of 2026. The deadline for applications is Thursday, February 26th, 2026 at 11:59 p.m. Projects must occur between April 1st and December 31st. Now, an important note, projects can be funded retroactively as long as they occur during the calendar year of 2026, meaning funds can be awarded to projects that have already fully or partially occurred. But please note that in order to be competitive in this situation, these retroactive projects must meet all program requirements for this funding opportunity. And applicants planning to apply for a project that has already been completed within the first 4 months of this year are encouraged to schedule an appointment with the Arts Mid-Hudson Grants team for guidance. For projects that have already occurred, it's important to note that applicants will be held to a higher standard of evaluation and are asked to discuss the project's success, how the money was spent, what the funding will cover, and provide event documentation, as well as make a compelling case for why SCR funding remains appropriate after the fact. If a project has only partially occurred with preliminary expenses or planning meetings, applicants should still be clear about this in the application. And that's not a detail that is really, I just want to make sure that that's clear. I don't think that's going to occur to very many of you, but I just want to make sure that that's clear going in. Okay, community arts grant goals. So now we're going to do a brief overview of all 3 funding opportunities. So the goals of the community arts grant are to make quality arts programming available to all residents in our region, particularly to communities with limited access to the arts. It also to assist with emerging arts organizations, individual artists, and grassroots groups to provide arts and cultural events, and to support the cultural expression of our area's diverse communities and support BIPOC, LGBTQIA+, and disabled artists, and to support arts and cultural organizers from groups who are leading this work. Okay, so the Community Arts Grant is focused on public arts and cultural programs such as exhibitions, festivals, performances, and workshops. Funded programs must have an arts activity as the primary focus. This is the largest category in terms of funding and applications received, and it is broad funding, a variety of project types, making it a very competitive category. Applicants with eligibility concerns are strongly recommended to make an appointment with staff. The funding amounts are as follows. Applicants may request $2,500 or $3,500. Those are the 2 amounts available to request. If awarded, applicants will receive their full requested amount. No cash match is required, but having additional funds contributing to the project strengthens the proposal and increases its feasibility. The requested amount does not affect the competitiveness of the application. The panel is concerned with the strength of the application, its content, and the potential impact on the community and the artists involved. In terms of mediums and location, all expressive artistic disciplines are eligible, including but not limited to visual, performing, written, digital, traditional, experimental mediums. And all funded activities must take place between April 1st and December 31st of 2026 in Dutchess, Orange, or Ulster counties, and in the same county as the legal applicant. All activities must be open and promoted to the public for participation in terms of access. All right, so in terms of community arts grants eligibility, eligible applicants include nonprofit organizations with, and this is important detail, a primary address in Dutchess, Orange, or Ulster counties, libraries, private universities, government entities, tribal organizations, and individuals and unincorporated groups applying with a partner nonprofit organization or with a nonprofit serving as their fiscal sponsor. Ineligible applicants for the Community Arts Grant include public school districts, public universities, New York State agencies and departments, county level government agencies and departments, Arts Mid-Hudson staff and board, for-profit organizations and LLCs, and organizations that have applied directly to New York State Council on the Arts for funding for fiscal year 2026. If an organization is incorporated as for-profit, it is not eligible for these funds. Even if an organization applied directly to NYSCA for fiscal year 2026 but did not receive it, they are not eligible to apply for the Community Arts Grant or any of the other grants in the SDR program. This applies to all three grants that we'll discuss today. Okay, and then the Individual Artist Commission overview is as follows. The Individual Artist Commission goals support Dutchess, Orange, and Ulster County artists in the creation of new work. The focus of this grant is the creation of new work. The Individual Artist Commission supports underrepresented artists within our region, including Black, Latina, Indigenous, Asian, people of color, LGBTQIA+, and disabled artists. All artists are encouraged to apply. And it's important to note that one of the goals of IAC is to highlight the vital role of artists within a community. Hold on. Okay, a little more detail about the Individual Artist Commission. Again, I want to reiterate that this grant supports the creation of new work, not the presentation of existing work. The primary focus is funding the artist to create a new body of work. So for the funding amount, applicants may request $1,500 or $2,500. Again, if awarded, applicants will receive their full amount and no cash match is required. In terms of mediums, all expressive artistic disciplines are eligible, including but not limited to visual, performing, written, digital, traditional, and experimental mediums. All funded activities must take place between April 1st and December 31st of 2026 in Dutchess, Orange, or Ulster counties, and in the same county as the legal applicant or artist. And then there is a public component, which we will go into in more detail later, with two available options for that public component, and only one of those options is required. The public component for IAC could either be one, a presentation of new work in person or virtually that is open to the general public and takes place, and this is an important distinction, in the artist's county of residence. The presentation of new work must take place in the artist's county of residence. So it could either be a presentation of new work or the involvement of a specific community during the artist's creative process. So if the artist chooses the second option, involvement of a specific community, they are not required to do a final presentation of the work, and vice versa. It goes both ways. The public component is secondary to the creation of new work. The speaker gave, So if an artist is planning a final presentation, you can work completely on your own to create the work without involving the community during the creative process. All right, so for eligibility, for IAC, eligible applicants for the Individual Artist Commission must meet the following criteria. You must be 18 years of age at the time of submission. You must be a resident of Dutchess, Orange, or Ulster County in New York State. You may not be enrolled in a full-time degree program, but part-time programs are acceptable. Projects must be independent work initiated by the artist applying, and artists who received the commission previously may apply again. We haven't offered this funding opportunity since 2024, so if you got it before, you can certainly reapply in 2026. So ineligible applicants include the following: artist collectives, groups, and artist collaborations, again, hence the name Individual Artist Commission. And and submissions intended to cover artist fees for a public program that would be more appropriate for a community arts grant. I will mention that a few times, but it's important to note that the Individual Arts Commission and the Community Arts Grant are intended to be two discrete projects. So although some applicants, although you may apply for both, they would need to be two distinct projects with one set of funds not impacting the other. And then the last ineligible applicant is a project where a property owner is commissioning someone to create work for their building lobby, as this may not be considered independent work initiated by the artist. Okay, so that was the Individual Artist Commission overview. With all these funding opportunities, you can find a lot more details in the guidelines, and we will go into detail very soon. And then lastly, we have the Arts Learning Grant overview. So the focus of the Arts Learning Grant Program is to provide a sequential skills-based workshop series of at least 3 sessions for a closed group of learners. This can be a K-12 public school or in an after-school or community-based learning environment. So examples of groups served could include, but are not limited to, in school, for example, a specific 4th grade class or all kindergarten students at a school, for example. Or for community-based learning, an example of group served could be, but are not limited to, residents of a senior living facility, an existing English as a second language ESL class, a 4-H club, a community club or association, a volunteer group, a Boys and Girls Club, a Girl Scout troop, just giving you some examples to brainstorm. So this grant is not intended to be open to the general public. That's an important distinction between these other 2 grants. It's only open to a closed group identified by the artist in the application. The sessions must be sequential and built on each other with the same group of learners and instructor. In terms of the funding amount, applicants may request $2,500 or $3,500. Those are the 2 available ask amounts. If awarded, applicants will receive their full request amount and no cash match is required. The Individual Artist Commission, redact. Okay, and again, all funded activities must take place between April 1st and December 31st of 2026 in Dutchess, Orange, or Ulster counties and in the same county as the legal applicant. Arts learning projects are intended to serve a closed, dedicated group of learners, and again, are not open to the general public. I will repeat myself throughout this presentation strategically when I feel it's important. Okay, Arts Learning Grant eligibility. So eligible applicants will focus on in-school programs first, since they're the 2 in-school and out-of-school categories. We'll start with in-school programs. In-school programs can include the following. Let's see. Yeah, so nonprofits can apply directly if their primary address is in Dutchess, Orange, or Ulster County. Individuals and unincorporated groups may apply. All applicants must be partnered with an eligible partner public school in order to pursue an in-school program. That's what really establishes the in-school structure. And then arts learning funds must not replace or appear to replace the role of certified arts teachers in schools. All right, continuing with eligibility. Now we'll go into after-school and community-based learning eligibility as opposed to in-school. Nonprofit organizations can apply directly to an after-school, can apply directly for this funding opportunity without a stated partner, but they must identify the closed group that they are working with. Individuals and unincorporated groups are eligible when they apply with a nonprofit serving as their fiscal sponsor. And then in terms of ineligible applicants, all right, now we'll go into the ineligible applicants. Here, one sec. Okay, ineligible applicants. The following are ineligible for the Arts Learning Grant. Public school districts are ineligible to apply directly. The legal applicant in a K-12 in-school program is either the nonprofit or the individual partnering with the school. Other ineligible applicants include public universities, New York State agencies and departments, and county level agencies and departments. Also, Arts Mid-Hudson staff and board members, for-profit organizations and LLCs, and for NISCA or REDC applicants, organizations that have applied directly to New York State Council on the Arts for funding for fiscal 2026, whether you received funding or not. Whether you received funding or not, you are not eligible to apply to, that should say Arts Learning Grant, but I'm sure you know what I mean. All right, inclusion and accessibility for the Arts Learning Grant. Arts Mid-Hudson strives towards broad inclusion and true access to arts and cultural programming for all. And its full DEIA statement and policies are available on our website so that you can understand. So that, I think it's an important consideration as you're developing your proposal to understand the funders' priorities and what they'll be looking for in terms of the DEIA elements. Arts Mid-Hudson encourages a thoughtful outreach and efforts to seek input from all groups in the region with specific outreach and inclusion efforts targeting underserved audiences. These funds are seen as an opportunity for organizations or artists to expand inclusion in their programming, for example, through marketing initiatives or compensating artists adequately. Inclusion efforts should be done by seeking input from the targeted community, not by from the target community, not by determining what they need without their input. For example, getting and paying Spanish-speaking individuals on a planning committee for an event targeting the Spanish-speaking community, or obtaining guidance from professionals with lived experience is encouraged. And when you go to the guidelines, you'll see a full list of historically marginalized groups. And that list is not exhaustive, but at least it gives you a sense of how you might think about incorporating that element into the element of inclusion and accessibility into your arts learning grant proposal. And yeah, just to give you like a sense, like jumping off point, these groups who may have limited access to arts programs due to location, race, economic status, gender identity, sexual orientation, age, religion, disability, or other demonstrable factors may include, but again, are not limited to Black, Latina, Indigenous, Asian, people of color, LGBTQ+, disabled, elder, youth, rural, low-income audiences. So again, there's a full list in our guidelines for you to really think about incorporating, and not just incorporating, just infusing inclusion throughout your application. So in terms of accessibility, priority will be given to activities that, for the Arts Learning Grant, that take place in locations fully compliant with the Americans with Disabilities Act. Applications are encouraged to consider accessibility before, during, and after your desired project for Arts Learning Grant. So accessibility includes planning to ensure individuals with disabilities may fully participate, resources for blind individuals, resources for deaf or hard of hearing individuals, translation services, free or pay what you can programs, transportation assistance, childcare, in-person or virtual consideration, especially for immune compromised people, and just a really thoughtful consideration of how outreach will be conducted to ensure that the groups that are the intended audiences will be connected to for this opportunity. So applicants, and I mean, this is true for all three funding opportunities as well, applicants are encouraged to consider how grant funds can be used to expand accessibility in specific ways for specific groups, and doing so, really giving that thoughtful consideration will increase your overall score when your proposal is reviewed by the panel, particularly in the area of impact. And we'll go into the specific criteria momentarily. All right. So now we are in the part of this presentation where I'm covering information that applies to all three of these funding opportunities. So we're kind of tying it in a nice little bow. So like I said, if you can only attend the first hour, you'll have a general overview of what we're looking for all three funding opportunities. Let's see. So for all three funding opportunities, you want to make sure again that you're in good standing with Arts Mid-Hudson's reporting. Current and past grantees must be in good standing with our reporting to be eligible for all three SCR funding opportunities, and that applies to all of the grants that you may have applied for within the past year or two. I don't, I know no one's missing from 2023, um, but 2024, 2025. If you're missing something from us, we are tracking it, and you will not be eligible for this funding opportunity if you have reports missing from us. So if you think that you are missing a report from us, please reach out to us as soon as possible to double check. All right, so in terms of eligibility for nonprofit organizations across all three funding opportunities, these are the eligibility requirements. You must be a nonprofit and or a 501c3 with a primary address in Dutchess, Orange, or Ulster County in New York State. The application does require proof of nonprofit status. You must have a board of directors or other governing body that meets to determine and review policy. Must have a board approved non discrimination policy in place and may not discriminate on the basis of race, color, national origin, religious belief, gender, gender identity, sexual orientation, age, or disability. You must be in adherence to the Nonprofit Revitalization Act of 2013. If you're not sure what that means exactly, there is a link in our guidelines that references the Nonprofit Revitalization Act of 2013. Say that 10 times fast. Libraries, private universities, government entities, and tribal organizations are eligible. In terms of eligibility for individuals, collaborations, and unincorporated groups, these are the overarching points across the three applications. Individual applicants must be 18 years of age at the time of submission. Unincorporated groups, collaborations, and collectives are eligible depending on the funding opportunity. Collaborations and unincorporated groups will select one individual to serve as the legal applicant on the application. Payment will be made to the individual listed as the legal applicant. Students enrolled in degree programs may apply for projects separate from their schoolwork. And again, part-time program, please. Full-time degree programs are not eligible. And applicants must live in and have a legal address in Dutchess, Orange, or Ulster County in New York State. And then ineligible projects across the three funding opportunities are projects that result in permanent public art, including murals, sculpture, landscape art, and architecture. Permanent public art is defined as anything that changes the value of a property, building, or land. Public art projects may be eligible if they are temporary and do not change the value of the building or land. Other ineligible products include activities that are primarily recreational, therapeutic, rehabilitative, or religious in nature. And the reason being that the main focus of the project for all three funding opportunities must be on an arts or cultural program, even if it does have recreational aspects. And that goes back to the eligibility to the evaluation criteria of across really most of our funding opportunities of artistic merit, feasibility, and impact. And then also non-arts focused activities are ineligible. And this can include fundraising events or programming used as a fundraising event. It can include humanities programs or programs that are primarily academic, martial arts, stand-up comedy, recreational parades, balloons, clowns, magic, programs occurring in private homes, and sip and paint events. And next, the budget considerations across three funding opportunities will be outlined. All three applications for all three grants have the same budget layout in the application, which makes it simple. One sec. I have that. I'm getting over that flu everyone has. Ask amounts range from $1,500 to $3,500 depending on the funding opportunity. So each grant will allow you to ask for some combination of $1,500, $2,500, or $3,500, depending on the funding opportunity. There is no, and if awarded funding, grantees will receive 100% of their requested amount. There is no cash match required for any of these funding opportunities, but again, being able to demonstrate that you have additional funds contributing to the projects strengthens the proposal and increases your score in the evaluation area of feasibility. The requested amount does not affect the competitiveness of the application. You are not more likely to get the grant if you ask for $2,500 versus $3,500. The panel is focused on the strength of the application, the content, and the potential impact on the community and the artists involved. So that's what you want to tie the amount you request to, the impact that your requesting that amount will directly lead to. So on the application form, applicants will be required to describe how the grant funds will be spent. There will be a field asking you below the budget form, asking you to describe how the grant funds will be spent and asking how you will pay for expenses not covered by your grant request from this program. So I'm letting you know so you have a heads up to prepare answers for that question and really evaluate if you do want to show that you have additional funds contributing to the project, really thinking through how you're going to present that information. And applicants are not required to submit or upload a separate budget form. The budget form that you're filling out is right there in the application, and we do not need to see an additional project budget form. All right, and some general budget tips. Let's see. What I recommend to really set your budget up for success and get a nice high proposal score is to, first of all, work on the narrative and budget in tandem, checking for consistency. So, for example, if you say that you're going to pay, as part of your budget, if you say you're going to pay artists $1,000 in your narrative, but then in the budget you say you're going to pay artists $1,500, that's immediate. The panel is going back and forth, confused, like, okay, what's really going on here? Whenever there's that kind of confusion, that's when I start to see points go down, when there's discrepancies. So that's easily fixable as you're editing and developing the materials together. And you really just also, at the end of the day, want to make sure that the narrative and budget are telling the same story. The grant request amount must match the total at the end of the how will the grants fund be spent table. So at the bottom of the table, you want to make sure that the amount you're requesting is the number at the bottom, at the end of that table. I encourage you to use the explanation column for the different line items, especially if it's not obvious why, because panelists, especially once our panelists are, they know what things cost. These are working artists who have been, doing what they've been doing for many, many years. So for example, a marketing line item that's in the thousands of dollars, it's probably not appropriate for this grant, but that's an example. A panelist is going to question that. Or if there are materials that are needed and let's say you plan on spending $500 on a certain kind of wood, I recommend explaining why do you need that particular type of wood? Why does it cost that much? How does that contribute to the artistic merit, impact, and feasibility of your project? I would not assume that you can just list that amount and that material without any explanation, without the panel asking questions. So I would really, you want to lay out your project, both in the narrative and the budget, in a way that explains to somebody who's looking at the first time, help them understand what you're trying to say. Don't assume that the panel is going to be able to read your mind. Make sure you check the guidelines for allowable and ineligible expenses. A general formula I like to share is expenses minus projected income equals the grant request amount. If that math adds up, your budget's well on your way to being in pretty good shape. And if you're in any way unsure about how to arrange your budget, reach out to Vanessa or I, and we will be happy to review it. And especially because we can review drafts and we can let you know, if you're heading in a direction that's competitive. All right, so some ineligible expenses for all categories include operating expenses of privately owned facilities, such as homes and studios or capital improvements, acquisition of works of art, contingency funds, lobbying expenses, regrants by applicants to other activities, awards, trophies, certificates, stipends for students, scholarships, fellowships, contests, competitions, cash prizes, juror fees, fees paid to children under the age of 18, entertainment costs, including receptions, food, and fundraising events. I want to stop and say, in my short time being here, I can think of multiple instances where we have done a preliminary eligibility check of grants once they're submitted. And even though we mentioned, multiple times that food is not a eligible expense, somehow there's always like three to five applications that still ask for food in the budget. And I'm here to tell you, save your time, save your trouble. It won't immediately disqualify you, but that's just the added paperwork, back and forth of, you got to take food. You can't spend your funds on food. So let's save each other the trouble this time and letting you know food is not an eligible cost. And then out-of-state travel costs, lastly. And I think we mentioned earlier that community arts grant applications may not apply to the individual artist commission for artist fees, since these are intended to be two distinct funding opportunities, each with different goals. Okay, evaluation and reporting. We'll go over the overarching evaluation and reporting requirements for all three funding opportunities. So I'll give you an overview of the peer panel review process. All grants submitted are reviewed using a peer panel evaluation process, which is modeled after NYSCA's review process. Arts Mid-Hudson staff, as a first step, will read all applications, and as I mentioned earlier, and will make notes of any eligibility concerns. Once submitted, applicants cannot make changes or revisions to their application, even if an eligibility issue is identified, unless the document is not visible on Arts Mid-Hudson's end. Staff will point things out to the panel and only reach out if a file will not upload or is not visible. The panel for these grants consists of artists, arts workers, and community members who evaluate the proposals and recommend a level of funding. Well, no, that's not the case here because the levels of funding are predetermined. The panel changes every year with new and returning panelists. The speaker recommends, I recommend continuing to apply in future years as the panel and outcomes change annually. So just because you had a certain set of panelists in 2026, you can assume that when you reapply in 2027 that you're going to get a completely different panel. Each county will have a separate peer panel for the community arts grant, composed of individuals who live in that county due to fewer applications expected, although let's see what happens. The individual artist commission and arts learning grant typically have one panel each. If a panel is multi-county, it will have an equal number of representatives from each county and will be balanced for expertise in various artistic mediums and project types. Arts Mid-Hudson staff and board members do guide the conversation. We do have a voice, but we do not have a vote. Panelists have access to information on previously funded projects, such as final reports from previous years, if the panel asks. And I do want to point out that prior funding does not guarantee continued support. So during the review panel meeting, so as just to give you a sense of the process, panelists read and review the applications ahead of time, and then they come together to discuss and score each application based on the review criteria. The review criteria are the same guidelines used by applicants to write their proposals. So applicants can nominate peer review panelists using a nomination form on Arts Mid-Hudson's website. If you go to our grants page, you'll be able to see the link that you can click on to nominate a panelist, or you can email us a recommendation. Or if you want to be a panelist in a future year, reach out to us, email us, and we will keep you in mind. And if selected, we will reach out to you for further instructions and filling out the paperwork. So if you receive a grant, if you are fortunate to receive a grant, grants recipients will be asked to submit an interim report, And this is usually not a lengthy process. An interim report usually comprises a paragraph updating on the project and a final report much later in the process, which it asks for more detail, including audience demographics. So once you get the grant, you will be made aware of the specific audience information needed upon receipt of the grant. So we will reach out to you with a contract, a disbursement form, and that'll outline all the details. And we also offer compliance sessions as well, where we go through, how to remain in compliant with your grant. We'll do this with the SCR grant. So you will have plenty of hand-holding if you get a grant. And we'll send you reminders. So we do ask, as to meet us halfway, we do ask that you work with us on this. We ask that you keep Arts Mid-Hudson updated on any major changes to the program. There is flexibility within the grant period, as plans, we understand that plans can change due to outside factors. And when people reach out to us like, hey, I need to move things a couple of weeks, I need to move things a month, is this okay? As long as the changes don't conflict with Arts Mid-Hudson or with what Arts Mid-Hudson can or cannot fund in terms of project type and expenses, and as long as they don't conflict with the guidelines of the funding opportunity of the grant you received, usually we can work with you, but it's important that you communicate with us. If you ghost us, that affects your eligibility for future grants. So please keep us up to date on any major changes to your project or program. All right. So to give you a sense of the responsibilities, if you're awarded a grant, if you are awarded funds, you will sign a contract with Arts Mid-Hudson agreeing to execute the project described in your proposal. You will complete, individuals will be asked to complete a W-9 so we can make a payment, and then the individual would receive a 1099 for 2026. Your check would be sent in one payment. Grantees are required to complete an interim report and final report, as I mentioned earlier. You'll receive the questions for both reports when you receive the grant contract, and you'll have the questions, the questions required for these reports will be made available to you months in advance so that you can prepare to submit strong reports. And very important, grantees are required to properly credit the New York State Legislature and NISCA and Arts Mid-Hudson for support of the project. Funding credit details will be provided upon funding notification, so you will have all of those details when you get the grant. And then submitting your proposal. So if there's one thing that you take away from this presentation of mine, please don't wait till the last minute to submit. Please don't do that to yourself. Don't do that to us. I mean, we will be there for you regardless, but yeah, don't do that to yourself. The reason why, in addition to it being stressful to submit last minute, the main reason is because Submittable, which is a wonderful portal, we love Submittable, but if there are a lot of people using it at once, we cannot promise that there won't be a glitch, that there won't be a crash in the system. And you can avoid that almost 100% of the time if you submit your application a few days in advance of the deadline. Is when I need to write a grant, I try to submit 2 or 3 days in advance just to avoid that last minute bottleneck. And also, you're empowering yourself to allow lead time to reach out to us in case you have any technical difficulties that come up. It's a lot harder to troubleshoot those technical difficulties if you reach out to us the day of, especially if they're complex technical difficulties. So give yourself the gift of plenty of lead time. And one way to really help facilitate that process is to walk through the questions and responses in your application well in advance of the deadline so that you have a chance to see all of the questions being asked and materials requested. The application portals for all 3 grants are open and available for you to look at right now if you wanted to. And I say this to you all because some questions and upload boxes are nested. And this applies to the Community Arts Grant and the Arts Learning Grant. So depending on at the top of application, whether you select applying as a nonprofit or applying as an individual, et cetera, you're going to see different questions asked depending on what you submit. and different materials asked for depending on what you submit. And like these are all listed in the guidelines. There aren't going to be any surprises, but yeah, you want to go through and look at all of the questions well in advance. What I like to do is create a Google Doc and write out and copy and paste all of the questions into those docs, including the nested questions, which involves me going through and sometimes selecting filler or inputting filler responses into the fields so that I can see and then copy and paste the questions from the entire application. And then I have them all in one Google Doc. I can share them with my team, and my team understands what they need to from what's listed in the Google Doc in terms of questions and documents selected or documents required as uploads. Then my team knows what they need to do, and there are no surprises. So that's a good thing. That is a best practice, I think, that I recommend starting a couple of weeks in advance of the deadline, sooner if you can. And again, if you require assistance in completing the online submission form, please do not be shy. Please reach out to us. That's what we're here for. We're not going to give you a hard time if you submit last minute. I'm just letting you know now that there's an easier way forward, but we are happy to help you regardless of the timing that you submit. All right, so some general notes about work samples across the 3 grants. So in addition to the required documents, work samples and optional supplementary materials will also need to be uploaded to the submission form. These documents must have digital versions, so they may be submitted online. And so general note for work samples is that we accept up to 10 files. This is for all 3 grants. I will say that work samples are required for the individual artist commission, but they are optional but highly encouraged for community arts grant and arts learning. Yeah, image files, videos, audio files, and literary samples are welcome. You can see a list of acceptable file types here and in the guidelines. And we encourage you, we're not required, but we do encourage you for maximum competitiveness to upload 3 additional documents. And these include, but are not limited to, letters of support, press articles, marketing samples, etc. I do want to tell you also that our panelists we never require our panelists to click on links within the application because we've had issues before where panelists have gotten viruses in their computer or other complications. So you can provide links. It's not going to disqualify you, but I would not put in link form something that you definitely want the panelists to view. I would include that instead as an upload, as a supplementary upload. And then lastly, in our overview, I want to share some general grant writing tips. So the first thing that you want to think about is answering the directions directly and succinctly. You want to start the project. The project description is like the heart of your application. It's not the most important part, but it is think of it as like the heart from which all of the veins branch out. The project description usually contains the core information, amount requested, project, location, key artist, time, date, period. Those are all elements that I recommend including to establish clarity, or to use a journalism term, the 5 W's: who, what, where, when, why. So you want to go through the application form to flag all possible questions so there are no surprises when you're filling out the form and submittable. You want to discuss the why of the project, including goals, its value to the artist, organization, or audience. You want to provide specifics to demonstrate the scope and depth of planning, which increases panel confidence in the project's feasibility. You want to write, and this applies to every part of the application, but you want to write for someone who knows nothing about the applicant or the project, or how much things cost. You want to be very clear about all of those details. You don't want to make assumptions about what the panel knows about your artistic or organization's history. Everything the panel needs to know must be clearly stated in the application itself and supported by the attachments. Again, we are very happy to review drafts to check on this. Throughout your application, you want to reference the goals and the priorities of the funding program and the guidelines. One nice best practice that can be helpful is printing out the guidelines and highlighting key phrases or eligibility concerns. You can also do this digitally. Free writing can help overcome writer's block. Something that can be really helpful, especially if you're stuck on getting started with your narrative and your project description, is taking the prompt of the grant question and then using it as a free writing prompt. Using the grant question as a free writing prompt. And yes, at first it's going to seem like you're writing down garbage, but as you keep going, as you keep writing, eventually you will start to find a thread and information that you can use. And that way you're infusing your narrative with your own unique voice, which really will align very beautifully with conveying the artistic merit of your project, and making your proposal memorable to the panel. Throughout, you might want to also outline key points for each paragraph of the guidelines. And we recommend controlling the review discussion by ensuring that there are no discrepancies in numbers or information, which can distract the panel, as I mentioned earlier. One nice tool that can help you with this is the Control F tool, the find tool. So you just hit the control button on your keyboard, and then you hit F, hit Control F. And that ensures that all instances of a number or detail have been updated if you have to change something during your writing, like a year or a number that occurs throughout. And that way you're sidestepping those little inconsistencies that can derail a panel discussion. And I also want to point out that Arts Mid-Hudson holds a grant writing workshop every year. It's usually towards the end of the year. If you're on our email list, you'll find out pretty much as soon as we do that the grant writing workshop is available. And personalized tips are available during our one-on-one assistance appointments. So across all three funding opportunities, this is a tip that can set your project description up for success. This is an example of a strong project description, like filling in the blanks. Again, you have your what, who, what, where, why, when, how, associated with the request. So I don't know, I'll use Arts Mid-Hudson as an example. Arts Mid-Hudson requests $3,500 to support artist fees for our first annual community concert series at Peace Park in New Paltz. We will host one concert on the second Tuesday of each month at 6 p.m. from June to September. Participating musicians include filling in the blanks. The more specific you can be, the better. Our program manager, again, specific name, will oversee the series and work with a team of 5 volunteers. This program will be hosted to fill a community need for more live music performances in the village of New Paltz. So this presents a level of specificity that will, and especially if you can infuse that level of specificity, the 5 W's plus how, throughout your application, that's going to increase your project feasibility score. That's going to help the panel understand that your project will work as you have specified, and it'll increase your impact score, that you're going to have the impact that you say you're going to have. So this is a very strong example of a start to a grant proposal. If you need an example. So yeah, just giving you a little bit more details about a strong project description. Yeah, I recommend providing a succinct overview of the scope of the project. This is often provided in chronological order or going through the phases of the project. Other elements you might want to include in the form of other paragraphs in the project description can include preparation, a community need assessment, can include audience and outreach, clear description of arts and cultural experience, and goals and how you will measure success. You want to show evidence of your track record, including audience data and brief historical info. And throughout, you want to show evidence of artistic merit, impact, and feasibility. You just got the 15-minute version of my grants writing workshop. So I recommend you attend that at the first possible opportunity. We will offer it later in the year, but that's enough information to at least get you started with writing a strong project description. All right, and so this is the last slide in our overview section of this application. So here's some first steps to get you started, because after hearing all of this, I'm sure many of you are like, okay, I want to get started. What are some first steps? What do I do first? If you need a fiscal sponsor, I strongly recommend that being the first step, because that can take a couple of weeks to find, if you haven't already secured one, to find a fiscal sponsor who'll work with you if you need one, if you're an individual or an unincorporated group. But yeah, if you're a nonprofit, you don't need to worry about that. Or the nonprofit, could be the fiscal sponsor. But yeah, that is probably the most lengthy part of the process. That's the part that if you're going to do anything for the remainder of this week towards this application, I recommend doing that first if you need to. And then the next step is reviewing the online application form and guidelines. And in the case of community arts grants and arts learning grants, going through answering the questions you can, so that you can see all the nested questions, and then so that you understand all of the questions being asked and all of the uploads that are going to be requested in that application. And yeah, it's never too early to begin working on the budget, so that you understand that, because working on the budget, that's, if you know that the budget's going to work, that it all adds up, then that is like the foundation of your project feasibility, because knowing that the money's going to work shows that the rest of the project is going to work. And then a lot of people, and I have been guilty of this in the past too in my own grant writing adventures, a lot of people make the mistake of thinking that the supplementary materials and work samples are like, oh, I'll think about those at the end. They'll be there when I need them to be. But those end up being very lengthy at times, especially when you have to deal with reformatting them to match the funder specifications, selecting work samples that directly support the narrative. And you absolutely want your work samples and supplementary materials to directly support the narrative. So January, this month, is a great month to be thinking about which work samples you want to use, which supplementary materials you want to use, reaching out for letters of support, letters of agreement, collaboration letters. And at any time, and we've already been getting so many lovely phone calls and emails asking questions about the nuances of these applications, please don't hesitate to make an appointment with us, reaching out to us at grants@artsmidhudson.org, or the number listed on the first slide, 845-454-3222, extension 11. Actually, Vanessa, if you could please drop in our email and phone number into the chat, that would be great, in case there are folks who have to bounce now. And while that's happening, I'm just going to take a quick second. I'm just going to take a quick 30 seconds, and I'm going to blow my nose. Okay, so for those of you who are staying on with me for the second hour, we're going to go into more detail about each of the funding opportunities, and we're going to detail them in the following order. We'll start with the Community Arts Grant in depth, and then we will go into the Individual Artist Commission in depth, and then we'll go into the Arts Learning Grant in depth. And then at the end of that segment, we will welcome questions. And again, if you only joined us a few minutes ago or only half an hour ago, please feel free to be putting questions in the chat box, so that Vanessa can address them as they come up. Give me one sec. All right. So, All right, let's go into community arts grants. Okay, so community arts grants in depth. Community arts grants provide project support for arts and cultural activities open to the general public. And that can include arts organization. The goals of the community arts grants funding opportunity include arts organization growth and public benefit. And grant awards are determined by a peer review panel made up of community members. Funding amounts include either $2,500 or $3,500 that can be requested. And if awarded, applicants will receive their full request amount. No cash match is required. Community arts grant goals include making quality arts programming available to all residents in our region, particularly to communities with limited access to the arts, assisting with emerging arts organizations, individual artists, and grassroots groups to provide arts and cultural events, and supporting the cultural expression of our area's diverse communities and supporting BIPOC, LGBTQIA, and disabled artists. And of course, supporting arts and cultural organizers from these groups who are leading this work. So to give you an overview of community arts grant funding opportunities in more depth, the priorities for this funding opportunity include new programming in our region and projects initiated by new applicants, program support for arts organizations, small or grassroots organizations, and arts-initiated projects, support for arts and cultural programming of organizations and grassroots groups led by Black, Latina, Indigenous, Asian, people of color, LGBTQ+, and or disabled arts workers, as well as hiring and paying artists who are part of these groups. And the groups that I mentioned, that is not an exhaustive list. If you go to the Community Arts Grant Guidelines, you can see like a full, well, not a full list, but a more exhaustive list of possible groups that are culturally marginalized in the arts and who we really want to see. Arts Mid-Hudson, NISCA really wants to see included in the community arts grant funding priorities. Other priorities include programming, which engages underserved populations and demonstrates a strong, well-considered community outreach and promotion plan to reach these constituencies. And then also dance, film, video, media arts, writing, poetry, performing arts, emerging art forms are all welcome under the Community Arts Grant. All right, now going into project eligibility. I'll go into the ineligible projects first, and it's a long list. So for part one, ineligible projects include projects that result in permanent or public art, including murals, sculpture, and landscape art or architecture, activities that are not open to the general public, including members-only programs, programs that exclusively serve a student audience, and or homeschool activities and programs, activities that are recreational, therapeutic, rehabilitative, or religious in nature when the purpose is primarily for rehabilitation, therapy, or worship, non-arts activities, including galas, benefits, or fundraising events, humanities programs, or programs that are primarily academic, martial arts, stand-up comedy, and recreational parades, balloons, clowns, magic, programs occurring in private homes, and paint and sip events, and projects that have not confirmed the artists involved or have no detailed method of selecting artists. And then a part two, other ineligible projects can include projects that do not take place in the same county as the applicant's address, startup or seed funding for the establishment of a new organization, general operating expenses, student projects, activities such as camps, clubs, or college associations that are not open to the general public, and public art on private property. Allowable expenses are as follows. Expenses that generally speaking, that relate to the proposed project tend to be eligible. The peer review panel, that said, may elect to prioritize projects in which the requested funds are allocated to artist fees, activities or projects of local arts organizations, including both live and virtual activities, community outreach, advertising and marketing efforts, direct administrative expenses and or planning and preparation expenses for a proposed event, supplies and materials needed to execute the proposed project. Individual items may not exceed $1,000. And examples include art supplies, sheet music, hardware, memory cards, and other consumable equipment. And of course, efforts to increase accessibility to arts programming. Oh yeah, we already went over this. All right, inclusion and accessibility. We'll go into that in more detail for Community Arts Grant. All funded community arts programs must be open to the general public. Programs limited to closed groups, such as private clubs, camps, or college associations, are not eligible under the community arts category. That would be if there may be eligibility with Arts Learning Grant, depending on the organization, but not community arts. Arts Mid-Hudson strives towards broad inclusion, of course, and true access to arts and cultural programming for everyone. And we also encourage, as I said earlier, thoughtful outreach to and efforts to seek input from all groups in our region, and specific outreach and inclusion efforts to underserved audiences. So again, see the application guidelines for a detailed list of the groups that may be underserved by the arts in our region, as well as detailed, the Arts Learning Grant will have guidelines, will have detailed ADA compliance policies and resources. In the case of workshops and participatory programs, Arts Learning Grant participant recruitment must be open to the general public. And if appropriate, workshops and participatory programs may place age and skill level restrictions on participation in the program. All right, so there are going to be differing guidelines depending on whether you're applying directly as a nonprofit or whether you're applying as an individual or an unincorporated group. So I want to spend some more time making those distinctions, since that is a common area of questions. So nonprofit eligibility is as follows. I do want to point out that nonprofits may submit one application for funding, and they can serve as a fiscal sponsor or community partner for unlimited projects. That is an option that you have. But you do want to make sure that the project that you're submitting for takes place in the county in which you have a primary legal address. So you must be a nonprofit and or 501c3 with a primary address in Dutchess, Orange, or Ulster County in New York State. Proof of nonprofit status is required. It must have a board of directors or other governing body that meets to determine and review policy. You must have a non-discrimination policy in place and may not discriminate on the basis of race, color, national origin, religious belief, gender, gender identity, sexual orientation, age, or disability. And again, you must be in adherence to the Nonprofit Revitalization Act of 2013. If you're not sure what that means, there is a link in our guidelines under the Nonprofit Revitalization Act of 2013. And other eligible nonprofits include, for the Community Arts Grant, include libraries, private universities, government entities, and tribal nations. Ineligible organizations for Community Arts Grant include public school districts, their components, PTAs, etc., 2 to 4 year public universities and colleges or their supporting foundations, New York State agencies and departments, and county level government agencies and departments. Business corporations, limited liability companies, and 501c4 or 501c6 entities are not eligible applicants for SCR funding, even with a fiscal sponsor. Non-incorporated chapters or organizations whose parent organization is not located in Dutchess, Orange, or Ulster County are not eligible. Past SCR grantees that have failed to submit final reports are ineligible. And then, of course, Arts Mid-Hudson staff and board members are ineligible. I feel like a broken record saying this again, but if you applied for NISCA in 2026, even if you applied, you are not eligible. So this applies to NISCA or REDC applicants. And also NISCA or REDC applicants may not benefit from community arts funded programs. This includes space rental, box office fees, or marketing as part of their annual programming. And that also means that if you've applied for NISCA funding in 2026, you may not serve as a fiscal sponsor or partner organization. Okay, to give you a checklist of attachments, if you were applying as a nonprofit for the community arts grant, include the staff list, and make sure to indicate if individuals are paid or staff or volunteers. You'll want to include a board list, a financial statement showing both income and expenses for the applicant's most recent fiscal year. Towns and cities do not need to submit a financial statement. And then, of course, proof of nonprofit status. And the guidelines go into more detail about each of these attachments. All right. Nonprofits applying directly may, as I mentioned earlier, may also serve as a fiscal sponsor or community partner for unlimited projects, but the project must take place in the county in which this nonprofit has a primary legal address. And I've mentioned that a few times. And the meaning that I assign to that is that really NISCA and we really want to be able to track where all these projects are taking place. And it's a lot easier to do that if these project takes place in the county where the fiscal sponsor has a legal address. It's really important to understand NISCA and Arts Mid-Hudson too. We really want to understand who and where and what we're benefiting according to the different locations. So that's the reason that the meaning that I assigned to that policy. And then, so the set of criteria are going to be different if you're applying as an individual or unincorporated group. And individuals and unincorporated groups are absolutely encouraged to apply to the community arts grant. The main criteria is that individual applicants or contact persons for the unincorporated groups must be at least 18 years of age at the time of submission, and they may not be enrolled in a full-time degree program. And they must have a legal address in Dutchess, Orange, or Ulster County in New York State, and the project must take place in the applicant's county of residence. If you are an individual or unincorporated group working with a nonprofit, the nonprofit would be either serving as your fiscal sponsor or your community partner. So individual applicants may designate a nonprofit they will work with prior to applying or working with Arts Mid-Hudson, who will help, or you can work with us. In some cases, in the past, we have been able to pair individual applicants with a nonprofit who will act as their community partner for the project once they're awarded funding. This isn't something we can guarantee, but we do our best to help you if asked. We will certainly do our due diligence to help you in that direction, or at the very least, point you in a direction where you can obtain this, just point you in the right direction and send you contacts and resources. So these options are offered to accommodate a variety of situations. It's up to the discretion of the applicant to choose which option is going to work best for you. So nonprofits serving as community partners or fiscal sponsors for individuals and unincorporated groups must meet all of the nonprofit eligibility requirements in these guidelines. That pretty much sums it up. So what is a community partner as it applies to the community arts grant? A community partner is a nonprofit organization that will work with the applicant to support the project. The individual or contact person for the unincorporated group is the legal applicant. If awarded a grant, the contract will be executed by the individual or group, and funds will be paid directly to the individual or contact person of the unincorporated group. The community partner must be incorporated in the applicant's county of residence. The community partner does not need to provide financial support, manage funds, or help execute the program, but they have the option to do so. The community partner's role is to lend appropriate support to the program, and the level of support is to be determined by the applicant and the community partner. If you're thinking you might need a community partner, again, I recommend starting this process in January rather than February, if possible, since this process of finding a community partner can take several weeks sometimes, if you don't already have one. Okay, so fiscal sponsorship, what does that mean? So a fiscal sponsor is a nonprofit organization that agrees to extend its nonprofit status to an individual artist or unincorporated group. The nonprofit fiscal sponsor is the legal applicant, and if awarded a grant, the contract will be executed by the nonprofit fiscal sponsor, who will receive funds and pass them on to the sponsored individual or unincorporated group. The project must take place in the county where the fiscal sponsor is located. The sponsored individual or group must be located in Dutchess, Orange, or Ulster County, but does not need to reside in the same county as the fiscal sponsor. The fiscal sponsor is not required to make a financial contribution to the project. It is the responsibility of the fiscal sponsor to provide the sponsored individual or group with the necessary tax documents regarding earned income should the individual or group be awarded a grant, i.e. Form 1099. And the applicants may select this option of obtaining fiscal sponsorship if they do not wish for grant funds to be paid directly to them, or if they require greater administrative support from a nonprofit organization. So it's really up to you, the individual or unincorporated group, again, to determine what situation is going to be right for your project and for your situation. Here's a checklist of attachments if you are an individual applying with a community partner, just to backtrack on the community partner. And again, this is all in the guidelines. You'll need a proof of residency, which contains your name and address. And documentation must be dated no earlier than March of 2024 for proof of residency. And when applying with the letter with a community partner, you will need a letter of commitment. A template of this letter can be found at our Community Regrants web landing page. If you're applying for fiscal sponsorship, here's your checklist of attachments. This is also on the guidelines, but since we're talking now, you'll need a fiscal sponsor staff list indicating if individual or paid staff or volunteers, a fiscal sponsor board list, including names and board details. Towns and cities do not need to submit this. You'll need a fiscal sponsor financial statement showing both income and expenses for the applicant's most recent fiscal year. Towns or cities do not need to submit a financial statement. And a letter of agreement that is signed by the fiscal sponsor. You can find a template of this letter of agreement again, at our SDR landing page. All right, and then fast forward late February, you're submitting your CAG proposal, not on the day of the deadline though. We don't do that. The review criteria. So right before you submit, we'll talk about the review criteria. The peer panel will review grant proposals using the criteria of artistic merit, project feasibility, and project impact. Now, for each of these funding opportunities, there is some variance in how the review criteria is worded and exactly what the panel is looking for according to the different funding opportunities. So you do want to look at that very closely and carefully when you're preparing your application. I will tell you that for the community arts grant, one distinction, one nuance with the project impact criteria is that the panel wants to see that the project is likely to make a positive impact on the arts and cultural scene in our three counties, in Dutchess, Orange, or Ulster, and the degree to which the project benefits and includes underserved audiences and underrepresented artists and arts and culture workers. They also want to see the degree to which the project advances DEIA, particularly for underrepresented communities, as suggested in the guidelines. And they want to see that you've created a new program, fostered an emerging arts discipline, or increased opportunities for artists. So you definitely want to look at those nuances when you're applying and looking at the review criteria for community arts grant. And then for additional supplemental documents, community arts grant asks for artist information, work samples. These are optional, but they are highly recommended. The guidelines go into exactly the formatting and the number of work samples that the panel wants to see. There is no limit on file sizes. We definitely recommend that the work samples that you upload for really all of the grants, but since we're talking about this one, community arts, that they reflect activity within the last 3 years. You may also include letters of support, press articles, marketing samples, basically up to 3 additional supplementary documents that support your proposal. All right. And now we are moving on to a more in-depth overview of the Individual Artist Commission, which has its own set of guidelines. All right, so if you're applying for Individual Artist Commission, this is your segment. So the Individual Artist Commission centers on supporting the creation of new work by an artist, as opposed to the presentation of existing work. Current and past grantees, of course, must be in good standing with Arts Mid-Hudson grants requirements. All artistic expressive disciplines are eligible, including but not limited to visual, performing, written, digital, traditional, and experimental mediums. We will only accept one grant proposal to the Individual Artist Commission per applicant. Projects must include a public component, and we'll go into more detail about what that involves. A presentation of the new work created either in person or virtually, which is open to the general public, or involvement of a specific community in the artist's creative process. Applicants may request $1,500 or $2,500. If awarded, applicants will receive their full request amount, and there is no cash match required. So the overarching goals of the Individual Artists Commission are to support Dutchess, Orange, and Ulster County artists in the creation of new work, to support underrepresented artists in our region, including Black, Latino, Indigenous, Asian, people of color, LGBTQIA, and disabled artists. All artists are encouraged to apply. And of course, the overarching goal is to highlight the vital role of artists within our communities within Dutchess, Orange, and Ulster counties. All right, going into the specific eligibility of the Individual Artists Commission. Individual artists would apply directly to this grant. Applicants may submit one grant proposal. Multiple submissions will not be accepted. All applicants must meet the criteria of being at least 18 years of age at the time of submission, being a resident of one of our 3 service area counties, or a resident of a federally recognized tribal nation, New York State, and must be residents in the county where their proposed project will take place, may not be enrolled in a full-time degree program. Artist collectives, groups, and artist collaborations are not eligible for the Individual Artist Award because, like I said, the focus is on individual artists applying for this grant and creating new work. It's really the work of the individuals being highlighted here. Applicants must submit work samples of their past work to be considered. Projects must be independent work initiated by the artists. And the guidelines go into this a bit more, but artists would apply. So with the other 2 funding opportunities, you can apply a couple of different ways, including as a nonprofit. But for the IA Individual Artists Commission, an important distinction is that artists would apply only under their own name, using their own social security number. So you, the individual, are the applicant of record. Now, an important note is that an artist incorporation or establishment of a limited liability company, LLC, or limited liability partnership is not disqualifying, but an artist is only eligible for SCR funding for a commission that they propose to undertake in their individual capacity. So that's an important distinction. So here are some examples of ineligible projects for the Individual Artists Commission. Activities that are recreational, therapeutic, rehabilitative, or religious in nature when the purpose is primarily for rehabilitation, therapy, or worship. Non-arts activities, including galas, benefits, or fundraising events, humanities, programs that are primarily academic, martial arts, stand-up comedy, recreational parades, balloons, clowns, magic, sip and paint events. Really, the thrust of this grant is that it's focused on an artistic concept, that it's focused on the expressive arts. So that's really an important distinction and reason for these ineligible activities. Also, projects that result in permanent public art, including murals, sculpture, and landscape art or architecture. Community arts grant applicants may not apply to the Individual Artists Commission for artist fees. We outlined that earlier. Projects undertaken by full-time students, projects submitted by current direct NISCA applicants, whether you received funding or not, projects that occur outside the artist's county of residence, and projects submitted by Arts Mid-Hudson staff or board are not eligible for the Individual Artists Award. Some allowable expenses include the artist fee for the individual artist. Please pay yourself. We love that. We encourage it. Community art outreach, advertising and marketing efforts, efforts to increase accessibility to arts programming, supplies and materials needed to execute the proposed project. Examples may include art supplies, hardware, memory cards, and other consumable equipment. And equipment, software, subscriptions, and training needed to execute the proposed projects. Please note that individual items may not exceed $1,000. And now we're going to go into the presentation aspect of this grant that is required. Going into the public presentation option first, there being two options. Public presentation is the first option for IAC. Artists may plan a showing of the new work as one of their options for their community engagement. This presentation may be open to the public and can be in person or virtual. In-person presentations must take place in the artist's county of residence. Large or expensive presentations are not recommended, just given the scope of this grant. You have 1,500 or 2,500. Please do not torment yourself by trying to do something bigger than what this funding scope really allows for. So engagement through a public program may take the form, for example, just to give you some brainstorming, of an exhibition, a performance, a reading, a screening, a workshop, or an artist talk that is open to the general public. If you're not sure what to do with this, if you're planning a public presentation but you're not sure what to do, please initiate a conversation with us, and we'll help you talk through what may be feasible and what might not be. And you may charge an admission fee for public presentations. Of course, you always want to, I won't go over this in very much detail because we did detail it quite a bit, and it is in the guidelines, but of course you want to make sure that your public presentation is inclusive and that you're striving for broad inclusion and true access to arts and cultural programming, and that you're thoughtfully reaching out to many groups in our region and specific outreach to underserved audiences. And the guidelines go into the details about what that looks like and how your jumping off point, including the American Disabilities Act guidelines. All right. The other option for your community engagement piece, instead of a public presentation, an alternative option is involving the community during the creative process. So you could work with a specific community during some examples of this type of interaction to help us brainstorm could include directly interacting with the community members during the creation of artwork. For example, community members may contribute components, provide information, input, or materials for the finished artwork. Or you could involve community members in the creation of artwork via workshops and or as performers in the artist created work and or creation of parallel work by a community group. Or it could be the inclusion of interviews within a segment of the community or inclusion of stories or anecdotes collected from the community group. Or it could be, so that gives you a jumping off point. And then how do we define community? That's a good question. Community can broadly be defined as a group of individuals sharing common geography, identity, interest, or belief. Communities that your project may engage with may include those based on location, racial or ethnic identity, gender identity, sexual orientation, occupation, etc. That's, again, just a jumping off point. Community involvement can be done virtually. You do not have to, both the public presentation, the community involvement can be in person or they can be virtual, whichever is going to be A, feasible for your project, and B, allow your project to have the intended impact. So that's a question that's frequently asked. Okay, moving on to as we get closer to the submission process. The attachments required. So as you can see, IAC is a little bit less involved than the other two grants in terms of attachments and length of the guidelines. That doesn't mean it's an easier grant, and it doesn't mean that the guidelines are less lenient. So to go into attachments, of course, we want to see proof of residence, dated no earlier than March 2024. We want to see your budget form inputted in the application directly into the form. your artist resume or bio. So for the individual artist commission, this is a distinction from the other two funding opportunities. Samples of past work are required with all submissions to the individual artist commission. So when selecting work samples, we recommend artists select work that reflects their range and skill, as well as work that relates to the proposed project. I will tell you that when a common occurrence that I see when points go down is, in addition to the ones I've already mentioned to you, is when the work samples, the content, and the overall messaging of the work samples and the concept behind it and the medium do not match what the artist is expressing in the rest of the proposal, the project description, the budget. We sometimes will see these beautiful proposals with beautifully written project descriptions, beautiful budgets, but then the work samples don't. It's almost like the work samples are like for a different grant. And I know that seems obvious, but work samples are extremely important for all of our grants, and they're especially important for the individual artist commission since they are required. So definitely give yourself the time that this funding opportunity deserves to really think through how your work samples are going to support the rest of your application, to set yourself up for the highest score possible. So you can include up to 10 files for your work samples. The formatting and acceptable file types are listed in the guidelines. And again, you may include 3 additional documents to support the work samples and the rest of your application. These can, again, for individual artists commission, include letters of support, press articles, marketing samples. The list goes on. Don't limit yourself to those options alone. If you're like, oh, Laura didn't mention this option, can I submit that? Reach out to me and I'll tell you. They are optional, but they are highly recommended because every funding cycle is competitive, and I'm sure this will be no exception. So the review criteria for the individual artist commission is, of course, artistic merit, project feasibility, and project impact. And impact of the project gets more nuanced within the individual artist commission. For impact of the project, the panel is looking for potential benefit to the applicant artist, quality of the public component through a presentation of the artist's work, or community involvement in the creative process, and that the artist contributes to that the overall submitted proposal contributes to the understanding of the artist's role as a critical member of the community. So what I just said, this wording, you can find it in the guidelines, but I did want to make that distinction between the other two funding opportunities. And of course, with all of these grants, you always want to make sure that what you're writing in your proposal directly reflects the funding priorities outlined in the guidelines. That's just general, good grant writing best practice. All right, now thank you for sticking with me. We are going to go into the Arts Learning Grant in more depth. So the Arts Learning Grant supports in-depth arts education projects to participants of all ages led by nonprofit organizations, cultural groups, and/or individual artists. It can take place either in school or out of school. And this funding opportunity is meant to build capacity for local artists and organizations while providing students and/or community members with high-quality artistic learning experiences. So some of the overarching goals of the Arts Learning Grant are to support nonprofit organizations, culture groups, and individual artists in providing in-depth arts education projects to participants of all ages, building the capacity of local artists and nonprofit arts organizations while providing K-12 public school students and/or community members high-quality artistic experiences, and also supporting historically marginalized teaching artists and students through in-depth and hands-on arts education. Some additional criteria to consider is that instruction must be sequential, age-appropriate, skill-based, and focused on the exploration of arts in the artistic process. Arts learning projects are intended to serve a closed, dedicated group of learners, whether it be in-school students or youth and/or adult learners. They should not be open to participation to the general public. If you have, if the project you're proposing is a workshop series open to the general public, either as drop-in during the workshop or open to pre-registration, then your project may be a better fit for the community arts grant, since, like I said, Arts Learning Grant is intended for a closed group of learners, and it should not be open to participation to the general public. So that's an important distinction between community arts grant and Arts Learning Grant. Community arts grant open to the public, Arts Learning Grant closed group, not open to the public. Arts Learning Funds can support K through 12 in-school projects occurring during the school day, or they can support after-school or community-based learning projects such as after-school programs and arts education programs for existing groups such as clubs and senior centers. All right, to go into the nuances of project eligibility for the Arts Learning Grant. Yeah, I want to give you a little bit more detail about the project requirements, since this is a denser grant than the other two. So like I said, you want it to be sequential and skills based. And then I also want to note that standalone assembly programs, single performances, student performing groups, or one-time visits to cultural institutions are ineligible, because like I said, you want it to have it be at least 3 sequential sessions. The panel wants to see hands-on participatory creation and or learning opportunities in one or more art forms that may culminate in exhibitions, productions, or demonstrations. The culminating event, of course, may not replace one of the 3 learning sessions, since the focus is on sequential arts instruction. Other requirements include in-depth, age and skills-appropriate learning opportunities. You want to include stated learning goals, methodologies and outcomes, and a means for evaluating your curriculum and your work. And then the programs may be in person, they may be virtual, they may be hybrid. And Arts Learning Grants must identify an existing group of learners who will participate, be it in-school students or youth and or adult learners. Yeah, that pretty much sums it up. Okay, we're going to talk about in-school projects versus community-based projects now, since the guidelines do vary between the two. In-school projects must take place during the school day and in a K through 12 public setting. Private parochial and home schools are ineligible to serve as partner schools. Arts Learning Funds must not replace or appear to replace the role of certified arts teachers in schools. Students may not be taken out of regular classes to participate or be self-selected for participation in the program. All right, and then after school and community-based learning projects is a distinction. Participants in these projects must be part of an existing group, such as a club at a library, social service organization participants, educational program participants, or senior center participants or residents. And that's just an example. That's not an exhaustive list of the closed group learners that you could work with in this grant. This is simply just a jumping off point. Projects may take place in a setting appropriate for the project, and that does go back to not only whether it's appropriate for what you're trying to teach and the proposed project, but also you want to also factor in accessibility and DEIA into that consideration as well, that the project works for the learners and that it also sets the learners up for success based on distinct needs and special needs. And like I said, participants can be part of a specific group or of any age. Okay, some allowable expenses for the Arts Learning Grants include the following. Generally, if they directly relate to the proposed project, they are eligible with some exceptions. So the main allowable expense priorities include teaching artist fees, direct administrative expenses and or planning and preparation expenses for a proposed event, supplies and materials needed to execute the proposed project. Individual items may not exceed $1,000. Examples of supplies and materials you may need for this grant could include, but are not limited to, art supplies, sheet music, hardware, memory cards, and other such consumable equipment. And of course, any expenses that increase accessibility to arts education programming. All right, ineligible expenses. There's lots of them, so I'll do part one. That can include operating expenses of privately owned facilities, such as homes and studios, acquisitions of works of art, contingency funds, the purchase of permanent equipment items or capital improvements, creation of textbooks, lobbying expenses. And then as a part two, regrants by applicants to fund other activities are ineligible for the Arts Learning Grant. Arts awards, trophies, certificates, stipends for students, scholarships, fellowships, contests, competitions, cash prizes, juror fees, fees paid to children under the age of 18, fees paid to board members of the nonprofit or nonprofit fiscal sponsor, entertainment costs, including receptions, food, and fundraising events, and out-of-state travel costs are all ineligible. And these ineligible expenses are also listed in the guidelines. So to go into more detail about the inclusion requirement for this grant and how important it is and how integral it is to this program. Arts Learning Grant funded projects, I'll reiterate, are not open to the general public. We encourage teaching artists and arts education programs to seek input from the community that you are working with to determine inclusion and accessibility needs and ensure that the relevancy and sensitivity of your teaching, especially when working with marginalized populations. And that's detailed the ADA compliance guidelines and guidance and different possible marginalized populations for consideration is listed in the guidelines for this grant. So for arts learning, there are differing requirements depending on whether you're applying directly as a nonprofit or whether you're applying as an individual or unincorporated group. So we'll start with nonprofit eligibility. Give me one sec. All right, so nonprofits applying to the Arts Learning Grant, they must be a nonprofit and or 501c3 with a primary address in Dutchess, Orange, or Ulster County in New York State. They must have a board of directors. They must have a non-discrimination policy in place. They must be in adherence to the Nonprofit Revitalization Act of 2013. You know where to find that info. Libraries, private universities, and government entities and tribal organizations are eligible under this nonprofit category. Potentially, definitely, I wouldn't assume that you're eligible under that category. Definitely check your paperwork and your charters because libraries can vary. So definitely check and make sure that if you are one of these categories below, that you have the paperwork, that you have the nonprofit paperwork necessary as listed in these other 4 guidelines to check your nonprofit eligibility. Just pointing out that there are nuances, especially when it comes to libraries and government entities. So for ineligible organizations include public school districts, including their PTAs and other subgroups, 2 to 4 year public universities and colleges of their supporting foundations, New York State agencies and departments, county level government agencies and departments. Non-incorporated chapters of organizations whose parent organization is not located in Dutchess, Orange, or Ulster County are ineligible. Business corporations, limited liability companies are not eligible, even with a fiscal sponsor. Past SCR grantees that have failed to submit their final reports are ineligible unless you reach out to us in the next few weeks. You are ineligible if you're delinquent on your final report. And then, of course, Arts Mid-Hudson staff and board members are ineligible. NISCA applicants, I think we've gone over this a couple of times, so I won't belabor it. I do want to highlight one nuance with this grant. NISCA applicants may not benefit from an Arts Learning Grant funded program. This includes space rental, box office fees, or marketing as part of their annual programming. They may not serve as fiscal sponsors or partnering organizations. And I also want to point out, specific to this grant, that schools that are involved in arts education projects currently receiving direct NISCA funding are not eligible to serve as partners for an Arts Learning Grant project. Checklist of attachments if you're applying as a nonprofit for the Arts Learning Grant include your staff list indicating if they are paid staff or volunteers, your board list. Towns and cities do not need to submit a board list. Your financial statement showing both income and expenses, your proof of nonprofit status, and your letter of commitment. And that's for in-school projects only. We'll go over that in a minute. I do want to say right up at the top that a letter of commitment from the partner school to the arts organization or artist must be included with the application. The letter of commitment must outline in detail the school's support of the project, whether that's monetarily or otherwise, and anticipated roles and responsibilities for each partner involved. The letter must be written on the school letterhead and signed by the principal. That is in the guidelines, and I will touch on it again in more detail. So, serving as a fiscal sponsor community partner, nonprofits applying directly may also serve as a fiscal sponsor for unlimited projects. And of course, the project must take place in the county with the nonprofit has a primary legal address in working as in a fiscal sponsor capacity. All right, and now here are the distinctions if you're applying as an individual or unincorporated group for the Arts Learning Grant. Individual applicants, you must be 18 years of age at the time of submission. You may not be enrolled in a full-time degree program. You must live in and have a legal address in Dutchess, Orange, or Ulster County. And you do need to apply with a partner school, or whether if you're going for an in-school project, or a nonprofit fiscal sponsor if your project is focused on after-school and community-based learning. So if you are applying for a partner school, individual artists, groups, or collectives and unincorporated entities must partner. Yes, so I went over that. And then, yeah, and of course, nonprofits serving as fiscal sponsors must meet all of the nonprofit eligibility requirements in these guidelines. And yeah, this is all just reiterating, some important points. If you're applying with a partner school, these are the checklist of your attachments. Of course, you need your proof of residency. As with the other funding opportunities, the documentation must be dated no earlier than March 2024. The guidelines go into some examples of common proofs of residency that we accept, such as driver's licenses, etc. Also, a letter of commitment is required if you are an individual or unincorporated group applying with a partner school to the Arts Learning Grant. It would be needed to be signed by the principal of the school and on the school's letterhead. The template of this letter of commitment can be found on the landing page for this grant. And then if you are applying with a fiscal sponsorship, just to reiterate a few points, you're going to be a fiscal sponsor expert by the end of this. A fiscal sponsor is the nonprofit organization that agrees to extend its nonprofit status to an individual artist or an incorporated group. For the Arts Learning Grant, for an individual artist or unincorporated group applying to the Arts Learning Grant, the nonprofit fiscal sponsor is the legal applicant. If awarded a grant, the contract will be executed by the nonprofit fiscal sponsor who will receive funds and then pass them on to the sponsored individual or unincorporated group. The project must take place in the county where the fiscal sponsor is located. The sponsored individual or group must be located in Dutchess, Orange, or Ulster County, but does not need to reside in the same county as the fiscal sponsor. So that is an important detail, a little nuance. I'm going to say that one more time. The project must take place in the county where the fiscal sponsor is located. The sponsored individual or group must be located in Dutchess, Orange, or Ulster County, but does not need to reside in the same county as the fiscal sponsor for the Arts Learning Grant. I just felt that was worth repeating. The fiscal sponsor is not required to make a financial contribution to the project. And it is the responsibility of the fiscal sponsor to provide the sponsored individual with the necessary tax documents regarding earned income if the individual or group is awarded a grant, and that's the Form 1099. So here's the fiscal sponsor checklist, which is also in the guidelines. I'll go through it right now. You have, and this is the same as, again, they're same guidelines as with the nonprofit plus letter of agreement, which I'll go through. You got your staff list, your board list, your financial statement, your proof of nonprofit status for fiscal sponsorship, and then this distinction, the letter of agreement, which is signed by the fiscal sponsor A template of this letter of agreement can be found on our landing page for this grant. All right, moving ahead as we get closer to submission. So some additional attachments to consider for the Arts Learning Grant include, of course, primary teaching artist resume or bio. Your work samples are optional for the Arts Learning Grant, but they are highly recommended. You can include up to 10 files. We recommend that the work samples reflect activity within the past 3 years, of course, because we want to see, evidence of your recent work, which shows which would support your artistic momentum. Let 3 additional documents may also be included. And again, a jumping off point, it can include letters of support, press articles, marketing samples. One thing I haven't mentioned yet is testimonials, participant testimonials that support the feasibility and the impact of basically your ability to carry out this work. Panelists do love to see testimonials that can really strengthen your application. Okay, so for the review criteria for the Arts Learning Grant, and we are minutes towards the end, towards the Q&A. Of course, as with all the other funding opportunities, the panel is looking at artistic quality, project feasibility, and project impact, and evidence of the project's growth if this project has been funded in the past. You won't get the same set of panelists, but it is good to show if you have received funds from Arts Mid-Hudson before for previously funded projects, for a project that you're, again, resubmitting or building upon for 2026 Arts Learning. Definitely, it's always shows strong impact and increases the impact score to show evidence of the project's growth over that period of being funded by Arts Mid-Hudson. That's a little tidbit that'll make your application even more competitive and increase your impact score. So I do want to highlight, you'll definitely want to look at the review criteria for Arts Learning Grant in more detail, because it does, even though it is artistic, project quality, project feasibility, and impact as the core 3 areas, there are some nuances in the wording that are different in Arts Learning than they are to the other 2 grants. For example, with artistic quality, the panel looks at degree to which the project provides sequential skills-based study and rich artistic learning experiences, clarity and appropriateness of the artistic goals and expected outcomes in relation to proposed project activities and ages served. For project feasibility, for this particular grant, the panel wants to see that the project has clearly defined objectives, the ability to meet them, a realistic timeline and budget, capable artistic and administrative staff, and competent financial management. And in terms of the project's impact, the panel wants to see that the grant creates a new program, fosters emerging arts discipline, provides arts education to students in need of opportunities, and or provides work for local artists. And that it fulfills a cultural need or otherwise unmet need in terms of artistic discipline, geography, or community engagement, and increases access to the arts or reaches a broad and diverse audience. So I just want to reiterate as we close this up, as we wind down, that even though all 3 of these grants have the same, the same core, not the same core, but that they all have artistic quality, project feasibility, and impact, how that's interpreted, what the fine print of what that means and what the panel looks for in each of the guidelines varies for each of the grants. So that's all that to say, you definitely want to keep the guidelines close by as you're designing your project and thinking about how you're going to meet this review criteria for your project. All right, so now we're winding down and we're zooming back out to consider all 3 grants. One thing I did not point out yet in this webinar is the fact that, one thing I really wish I had time to include was examples of past projects funded through these opportunities from back in 2024. That said, you can find examples of past projects by looking on our website. If you scroll all the way down on that landing page, you'll be able to find examples of past funded SCR projects, which I think will be helpful in informing the project that you design. So your first steps, if you're as excited as I am, you probably want to get started right away. And so some good first steps that you can do can include securing a fiscal sponsor or partner school if you need one, if you're applying as an individual or unincorporated group. And again, this is applicable only to community arts and arts learning grants. You'll want to take the time to review the online application form and guidelines, including any nested responses that are dependent on whether you choose whether you're applying as a nonprofit or whether you're applying as an individual or unincorporated group, so that you're not surprised by those nested questions when you go to apply. Of course, review the guidelines like they're the back of your hand, incorporate the guideline language. You want to make sure that that your proposal speaks directly to the guideline language. And of course, you're going to want to organize the digital copies of all required attachments and also the highly recommended supplementary materials for whichever grant or configuration of grants you're applying for. And at any time, of course, you please make an appointment with us. We're happy to help. All grant proposals for all three funding opportunities are due by Thursday, February 26, 11:59 p.m. There will be no exceptions made. Once you submit, you cannot make any changes to your proposal. Please, we urge you to plan ahead accordingly. If you need any assistance in completing the online submission form, please feel free to reach out to us well in advance of the deadline. And I do also want to reiterate that we will be sharing a recording of this webinar. And since it's a long webinar, we will be basically, when you receive it's going to be sent to you as an unlisted YouTube link. So you wouldn't be able to find it looking at our YouTube channel, but you will be able to find it. We'll send the link directly to you so you can view it. And then you'll be able to click through. There'll be basically like a linked table of contents where you can click through to the different sections that are applicable to your particular grant so that you don't have to scrub through the whole video to find the information that's applicable to you. So that will be sent out. I would plan on sometime next week is when we'll probably be able to send it. And it'll be emailed directly to you since you already signed up for an RSVP for these info sessions, and we already have your email address. So we'll send it to you. You don't need to reach out and remind us, but if you're worried, you're certainly more than welcome to. We love hearing from you. And we will offer technical assistance appointments. I mean, we will make them available in the next few days, but the first set of technical assistance appointments will be available on Friday, January 23rd at the earliest. That's when the appointment slots that's the earliest set of appointment slots available. So keep an eye out for that email so that you can sign up for those technical assistance appointments and get your drafts reviewed. And thank you again for your interest in the Statewide Community Regrant Program. I really appreciate the wonderful turnout today. Thank you for, whether you were able to stick around for the first hour or all 2 hours, thank you so much for joining us. And again, this is our contact info. You can reach Vanessa or myself. If you email grants@artsofhudson.org, you'll reach both of us and one of us will get back to you in a timely manner, or you can call us if you have questions at 845-454-3222, extension 11. And we are, at least one of us will always be available on Monday through Friday, 10 a.m. to 5 p.m.